Good afternoon. My name is Scott Turner, and I'm running to be your district attorney. After 10 years, there's going to be a change in the district attorney's office. So you have to ask yourself a couple questions. What do you want to see in that change? Do you think the district attorney needs to be somebody with experience? You know, I was watching the Broncos game last night and watching Peyton Manning play the first few series. And I think everybody's pretty happy with the Broncos signing of Peyton Manning and think they're going to take the Broncos pretty far. Okay? Would you feel as confident as the Broncos signed Peyton Manning to play middle linebacker?
No.
No, probably not. And that's the experience my opponent wants you to believe he has. He's played the game of football, so now he thinks he can be quarterback. And that's not the way it works. I've been a prosecutor over my 20-plus year legal career for 9 years. I've worked in both small and large jurisdictions. I know what works and I know what doesn't work. I think I can implement programs in this community which will benefit the citizens and benefit the criminal justice system. I work with Republicans and Democrats who are district attorneys from all across the state. Okay? I've talked to them about what works in their similar sized jurisdictions. Those are the contacts I have that I can put to work for you. Do you think the DA needs to be a leader? I can tell you I've been a leader in this community, in this judicial district. I'm president of the Clear Creek Board of Victim Advocates. I took the Crime Stoppers program, which was a defunct organization, got it turned over to a citizen board. We now have $8,000 in the bank and are actually paying out tips again. I worked with victims organizations all across the jurisdiction, including the wonderful Bright Future Foundation in this community. When a lady was killed last year or actually 2010 up in Leadville, it exposed a loophole in the criminal justice system. I wrote the law that closed up that loophole. And again, I worked with representatives all across the state, both Democrat and Republican, in a very partisan legislative year. That legislation sailed through both houses and was signed by the governor. And that's legislation that's going to save lives. Do you want somebody who's prosecuted the big cases in this jurisdiction? You know, some of the cases I've done: homicide, life in prison, a very vicious attempted murder case here in Eagle County, which he's serving 46 years in prison for. Negligent homicide, 2 years. An attorney who stole $500,000 of his client's money and headed off to Mexico in Summit County, now doing a dozen years in prison. But it's not just about putting people in prison that makes a good prosecutor. It's realizing the difference between the criminals and those who make mistakes. And that's why I work with the drug court program to give those who have drug problems the chance to stay out of prison. I work with the juvenile diversion program, which gives kids who make mistakes a second chance to keep their record clean. You know, that's what we need. And that's why I'm asking people to look at the difference between myself and my opponent. Who here thinks that sex offender registration is important in this community? Important for the safety of our kids? Yeah. You know what my opponent thinks about sex offender registration? He thinks it's humiliating.
Good.
I say, I don't give a crap. If you don't like it, get the hell out of Colorado. But when you look at the differences between myself and my opponent, that's what you see. Somebody who's all talk versus somebody who is a person of action. I've come here in these past 5 years. I've done the cases. I've got involved in the community. One thing that we've both talked about, my opponent and I, is what it takes, to be an instructor, to teach. Okay? Problem is, he hasn't taught anything. I'm a former college professor. Okay? I teach law enforcement officers in this jurisdiction and across the state things like the legislative updates so they know what the current laws are. Domestic violence. Taught classes on strangulation, classes on sex assault. Just a few weeks ago, I taught a class to all of the investigators in this jurisdiction about advanced homicide investigations. How are you going to do that if you've never even prosecuted a homicide? I also teach attorneys in this jurisdiction and across the state things like jury selection, opening and closing statements, issues on warrants, and even judicial prosecutor ethics. Okay? That's the kind of knowledge I can impart to the attorneys who come work in this jurisdiction. So I've got a lot of swag up on the table there. I've got some very inconspicuous grocery bags if you want those. You know, we've talked about, a couple of candidates talked about money. I will tell you that I have all the money it takes to run my campaign. Only problem is most of it's in your pockets. So you're going to have to give some of that up, and there's some white envelopes over there to help you do that. I also have some books over there that were given to me by a gentleman. And he asked that once I was done with them that I pass them on. Hey, those books are over there. They are free. Okay? If you want one, if you see something there that's interest to you, there's a book by Ann Coulter, I think Dick Armey, and several other conservative books. Take one. If you want to leave a donation, great. You can do that, but you don't have to. I'd rather you read it and pass it on to somebody else who has an interest in that area. So I thank you for your time, and again, please check me out. I got Facebook, website, all that good stuff, which really paints the difference between my opponent and I. So I think you want somebody who can protect you, protect this community, who has proven that he can do that, and I'm the only candidate in the race that has done that. Next up is a